Yeah, it's good for me to know so I can plan out in the month of September, like how many hours of work it's likely to be.
You guys can come on in. Melissa will be joining us. Hey, how are you?
How are you? Good to see you. Yeah.
What's going on? Hey guys, what do you bring to the town?
Rural Tech.
Rural Tech.
Come on in. Thank you so much. Good. How are people feeling? Happy? Full bellies? Good? Awesome. So we just have a little bit more left for you this evening. A few more really exciting, fun things. Thank you for sticking around. The next activity we're going to do is a couple Ignite talks. So raise your hand if you have seen an Ignite talk given before. You know what that is. Okay. Cool. So we started to do these, I guess it was last year, but realized that it's a really, really fun and effective way to kind of deliver a message. It's not easy, so I have tremendous respect for anyone who ever gives an Ignite talk, so please show some love for those who are going to be getting up in just a second. But we'll have 3 short 5-minute presentations, and then we'll just end with a community Jeopardy game with prizes with our game show host, Alan Hudson. So. One important announcement I forgot to mention earlier. Nick, is Nick around? Yes, so we would love to hear from as many of you as possible. Nick Lyle, right over here, is an amazing hub member for Rethink Media, and he loves filmmaking and films. So he's awesome and volunteered to help us put together just like a short film about the hub community. He has a camera set up in one of our meeting rooms, so at some point this evening, if you are at all interested, please just stop by. There's a couple different questions you can answer. We'd love to just have little clips that feature the many awesome people that make up this community. So thank you, Nick. So if you see a guy with a camera, it's not creepy. He's supposed to be here, etc. Good. Okay. So our Ignite Talk presenters this evening represent 3 amazing organizations in our community. The first one we're going to start with is the one and only Dennis Whittle, head of Feedback Labs. Very excited to hear what he has to say for his talk. It's a little bit technically fancy, so we're going to have a video in the middle of the talk. But just the basic premise for anyone who doesn't know, Ignite Talks are really fun, fast-paced talk that last exactly 5 minutes and are made up of 20 slides that auto-advance every 15 seconds. So again, very difficult to be doing these talks, and really, really appreciate those who have stepped up. With that, I'm going to invite Dennis to come up and join us. Can we get...
I've never done one of these before, so.
Can we show you?
Okay, good. All right. Don't surprise. That's a surprise video.
All right, one more time. That's what I'll say.
Okay, here we go. All right, so with the recent elections, I realized that we've been taking a lot of things for granted. And I personally have taken a lot of things for granted in my life. So a lot of these things we take for granted, people used to think were crazy. Or even evil. Nina told me that I had to speak. She told me this was so difficult to do that I cut my entire presentation down to about 2 minutes. But seriously, I have been thinking a lot about this. Up until 500 BC, people thought it was normal, and they took for granted the fact that everything was ruled by kings and mysterious gods and forces beyond their control. And it wasn't until 500 BC that they realized that they could create an early form of democracy. But democracy went out of favor for over 500 years, about 700 years after the decline of the Roman republic. And it wasn't until 1215 that the Magna Carta came about and the Brits stood up against their king. But it wasn't all Brits, it was only the nobles. And it wasn't until 500 years after the Magna Carta that people got up in the United States and in France and said that the right of the people is the highest above the government. But it wasn't all the people, because until 1865, people took it for granted that African Americans should be enslaved. It wasn't until 1865 that they were liberated. Some lesser important things have been taken for granted. From 1918 to 1933, it was taken for granted that you shouldn't be able to drink alcohol in the United States. And it wasn't until 1933 that the amendment was passed to let us drink alcohol. One thing that I took for granted, my grandfather took for granted, is that women should not be allowed to vote. And this was taken for granted until 1920 in the United States, and roughly the same time in other places in Europe. In 1920, women got the right to vote. It was taken for granted until 1940 that people would work 7 days a week and often 80 or more hours per week. And in 1940, the 40-hour work week was instituted. It was taken for granted that democracy was for everybody as long as you were paying poll taxes and do other things like pass reading tests. The poll tax in the United States was not abolished until 1964. It wasn't until 1964 that you didn't have to pay up to vote. And it wasn't until 1965 that really, even in the United States, African Americans and others were given the full franchise. It was taken for granted until then that they would be discriminated against, not only in voting, but in water fountains, etc. 40 or 50 years later, until 40 or 50 years later, it was taken for granted during all of history that people of different sexual orientation and sexual identity would not be able to marry. And in 2015, we passed the Equal Marriage Act, and the Supreme Court held that anybody could be married. So this made me just think, what's next? And the Open Gov Hub is all about what's next. And I don't know what's next. Maybe it has something to do with the free flow of people across borders. And in the same way we took it for granted that slavery was okay until 150 years ago, maybe in the future we'll think it's crazy that we restricted people from crossing borders. It might be something else. It might be something else that fails to fulfill the ideals. This is on the American ideals that are equal in Europe and around the world of humanity. And I guess the question is for us, for me, for all of us, is can we make good on what Mr. Becker, who died this week, sang about in 1972? I'm sorry that the technology, we need Rethink Media to work with us on this. But can the Open Gov Hub hit it, bit it? I appreciate it. Can we go back, Jack, and do it again? And what will be the next thing? Seriously, what will be next, and can we do it again? Can we bring about whatever the next version, whatever the next slide in this progression will be? And is the next slide coming? Or is it stuck? And so I've started to ask myself, now that I just turned 56, what am I doing to help do it again? And I've been wondering, what part should I play in something equally significant? What's going to be so important that it's going to be on this slideshow in 100 years or 500 years or 50 years or whatever? And am I contributing to something that is important like that? See, I Neda put the fear of God in me so much. But I will just end by saying that I've been thinking a lot recently about whether I can leave behind something that my grandkids would be proud of. So that's what motivates me to come into work every morning. Thank you very much.
I didn't invent the Ignite talk. I just am a proponent of it. Put that out there. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dennis. Our next presenter is Mr. Fernando from Development Gateway. He is going to be talking about an awesome project that he's been working on. And can we give him one more round of applause, please? Okay, we're gonna get started here. Ready? Okay, let's do this.
Hello. Oh, my voice sounds weird. So, I'm Fernando Ferreira. I'm working in Development Gateway, and this is a project that we've been working for the past year. So, what is the PREMAN project? It stands for, Preventing Maternal and Neonatal Death. Basically, we're trying. This project tries to determine why are the maternal and newborn mortality rates still high, even when all the rest of the health indicators are getting better. This project is focused in 4 districts in the northern Ghana. So this is going too slow. It is. This timing is not correct. I'll push it. Anyway, so
Go GG.
So a lot of the data that they collect usually about these events, it's about the biomedical causes of death. What is the clinical cause of death? But the question that this project tries to answer is related to the social and environmental factors that contribute to either this event becoming a death or a near miss. One of the kind of questions that are collected, what is the substance applied to the umbilical cord? Did the mom look for assistance outside the community? What was the kind of treatment that they saw? And it not only tracks the death events, but also the near misses. So near misses are when the mom or the baby gets very ill but survives. As I said, it's focused on these 4 districts in northern Ghana. The workers are doing deep interviews that are called social autopsies that I'll show later on. These verbal and social autopsies are long list of questions that are collected in paper, and it's through an interview. And it tries to collect not only the clinical reasons, but also the environmental factors. The questions are things like how far is the nearest health clinic? Is there a way to get there? Did the mother get any prenatal care? What kind of medicine was used? The years of education, household wealth. There you go. Did they use traditional medicine or Western medicine? So these kinds of analysis is sometimes framed as in terms of these 3 delays. How long it took, who took the decision what delayed the decision of seeking care, how long it took to get to the health facility, and if once they got adequate care. So this is the tool we are building. We are basically mapping all these events. Every time these interviews are collected, they collect the coordinates where this event happened, and we are displaying it. And it has basically, it's yet another GIS map, but it's showing we're still defining with the PREMAN team from the University of Michigan, which I forgot to mention, what's the best, the most compelling way of showing this that can be used by district health authorities to make decisions. So now this is the more technical part. All these paper interviews are then moved through Survey CDO, some other online tools, to a digital format. And from that, they collect dozens of variables, and we select the 32, 34 variables that are more relevant. Because if you get too many options, you can get very confused. So what we do, we selected 34 of these variables, and then we clean it up and we import them on the backend. And once they're imported on the backend, we publish them on the map, and we visualize it. Now the question is we have color-coded clusters. That's a mouthful. And but is this enough? Is this useful? Should we show individual points? And that's why we are working in this part of the project. So you have all these events, and the key here is having some way of filtering through all these 34 or so variables that are divided in these 4 categories. And I'll move faster. On top of that, so you're showing the events, you're filtering them, and then you can overlay some other layers, like demographic layers, like what's the location of a health facility, what's the location of the chief compound, what's the location of a market, where are the roads, where are the rivers, where are the lakes. And one of the challenges that we are facing right now is how do we display qualitative data? All these interviews come along with a lot of comments and impressions that the interviewer got. And sometimes when you're doing this data analysis, you find these little pieces of information that reminds you that each of these rows is that something bad happened to a mom or a baby. And sometimes you find things like this, like the respondent was beaming with smiles with the survival of her child. And if you want more information, you can get it there. And that's it. This is the worst
It wasn't just to agree with Dennis. This was not 15 seconds.
Okay, makes sense. No, thank you so much. We the small rebellion. So speaking of small rebellion, so we have our friends from Root Change who are going to invite up to give our third talk. They actually opted to present in an even more creative format. So we're going to have Claudia give a bit of an overview of Root Change, and then they are going to invite a couple people to spin the wheel on their Wheel of Fortune. So yeah, give it up please for Claudia and Smirsky from Root Change.
Thank you. Yeah. Root Change doesn't like to obey rules, so we're a rule breaker in many different ways. Okay, pull up. There we go. So someone's going to have to help us with time. Can someone be checking that we don't go over 5 minutes, because we don't have any slides for this presentation. So, yeah, I'm one of the co-founders of Root Change. My name is Claudia Liebler, and I'm the co-founder with Evan Bloom, who's not here with us today, but my colleague Smriti, like he is here. We are new Hubbers, although we have collaborated with a number of people here in the room in different ways, but we're new Hubbers in the sense of getting a desk here and starting to really get in touch and connected to the community. And after hearing everything that was talked about earlier, wow, there's a lot going on, and I'm really excited to be We are really excited to be a part of it. We are a small international NGO, but with a very big footprint, we like to say. And by that, we mean we're really well known in the space to be kind of the renegades, if you will, of foreign aid. There's a lot about the foreign aid system that we do not agree with, even though we are ourselves a part of it. But there's a lot of work that we are doing now that really is trying to look at how can we fix, we're calling the operating system of foreign aid. How can we do some things differently that will really put development in the hands of local owners, of local people? And we've been talking about this for years, right? It's not a new concept, but we're still not there. There's still a lot that we have to do to begin to really hand over the reins, if you will, of development to local people. So that's a lot of our work. Another thing that is representative of us is that we're systems people. So when we do our capacity development work overseas, we focus not just on some of the capacities that have to do with internal systems, like, good financial systems or good HR systems, and focus more on how organizations are operating in their ecosystem and who they need to connect with and how they can use the knowledge of their place in the ecosystem to really increase their impact and to figure out how to get things done. So the systems view is also something that is really, really important to us, and we've been working quite a bit on. What we've got here is a wheel with a bunch of our work on it. Let me bring it up a little bit closer here, and Smriti's going to help me with this. And what we would like to do is to ask anybody who is willing to just come up here and spin this wheel and see, we're trying to help Alan out. I mean, he's going to be doing a game next, right? A community, what? Jeopardy. So like this is, getting you ready for community Jeopardy. So can we ask someone to come and just spin this wheel for us, and wherever it stops, we're going to just say a couple words about the project or about the item that's here. Would you mind? Sure. Thank you. Give it a good spin. Pet peeves. So, what are some of the pet peeves of route change? Oops. Well, one that I'm thinking of right now is the log frame. We do not really like the log frame very much at all. We feel like it boxes you in. It's a requirement of many donors, as you all know, because you've all had to do it before. But we really find it very much too linear in its thinking. I don't know why this is. Okay, let me back up a bit so I'm not squeaking. We find it way too constraining, and the fact that it's a requirement by many donors is also something that we feel we're being put in a box to have to describe.
I put a 5 minute timer.
You did?
You can have one more minute.
Yes. Okay. Oh, God, we wouldn't have done very well with the slides, guys. So, okay. Local works. Okay. This is a big project we're doing in Malawi right now, and it really fits in with what I was talking about earlier. And that is, it's a chance to work with Malawians to figure out new ways of new innovations in foreign aid. So we're looking at alternative financing models. We're looking at ways in which we can do capacity development in new and different ways. We're looking at issues of the extractive nature of research and how we can turn that on its head so that communities can actually own the data that we're taking out of the community. We even thought about things like, wow, maybe we need to be paying villagers for using their data. So all kinds of innovative ideas. We're doing a social lab in Malawi, both in the north and the south, and inviting a whole group of multi-stakeholders to come and join us and to to think through a series of what ifs. What could it look like if we did A, B, or C? And it's a really exciting project, one that we're all energized by. And I'll end on that note.
Sorry, yeah, thank you. Awesome, thank you so much. Can we get a huge round of applause for Alexa? I have to say, this is an innovation I think we will happily copy here at the Web. It's awesome, and we all should keep playing even after this. So the last thing we're going to do as a little treat for those of you who have stayed with us for our whole program is a quick little Jeopardy game, community Jeopardy game or a hub-themed Jeopardy game.